Happy New Year. It is January the 2nd. And one of the things I want to do more often is share pieces of music with you on this channel that I come across that are interesting or beautiful, or in this case, both. This is an electronic piece, so there is no score. And I think in that case, it's very helpful to look at this view here. I'm using an application called Sonic Visualizer, which is free to download, and it allows you to create a bunch of different views. What I have here is the waveform view up on the top here and the spectrogram view. And you can change the parameters for all of these. This is just kind of out of the box. The waveform is familiar. It represents amplitude over time. The spectrogram shows frequency over time. Right, so on the left hand here are buckets of frequency. And then if the sound includes something from that frequency bucket, then it's represented here. You can change the coloring and the different sensitivity of this threshold. I quite like this white on black. It's very old school. But what this lets us do is, it gives me something I can talk through in a visual representation of a piece that exists really only in the recording, right? It's not a score. The piece wasn't created from this. It's a representation of the piece. So what is this piece, you may be wondering? Well, this piece is by Vladimir Ussachevsky. I'll put a link to this website, which has a summary of, if not all of his pieces, at least all of his major pieces. This piece is called Wireless Fantasy, and it was written in 1960. Ussachevsky is one of the pioneers in electronic music at Columbia University. So one of the first musicians, first composers to really get around the musical capabilities of the studio, of the tape equipment, of the sort of frequency oscillators that you would have found in laboratories, and really starting to get into how to use some of those sounds. Now in this piece, in the Wireless Fantasy, he's using concrete sounds. They actually are all sounds produced by a shortwave radio operator called Lee DeForest, sorry, who invented the vacuum tube that was used in modern radio and recording technology. Anyway, Ussachevsky takes, you'll hear the sounds of radio, right? And then creates a collage. So I'm going to jump around the piece. So what I like here, these tall bands are basically static, right? It means that there's frequency across the spectrum, static. And one way of looking at the piece then is it's bordered by static and static. Now, it's a little bit hard to see on this view here, but there's a sort of a high-pitched descending gesture, which is this gesture here, right? And here. And here's almost like a melodic gesture. If I were to redraw it like this, or maybe let's try peak bends and do a log. Yeah, that didn't help. There's ways to, you can see it a little bit clearer on this view. But if I go to frequencies, and I'm going to bump this up, You can see a bit more of that detail in terms of that melodic detail. But one thing that's really apparent from this view of the piece is this boundary idea of static, something else, static. Now, you can see here I'm in the middle. What is this down here? It's Wagner, Parsifal, broadcast through shortwave, so that tinny or distant sound. Why I think this piece is really beautiful, I think, and it's this moment here that makes it beautiful to me. We have the reference point of the Wagner, and even if we don't know that it's Wagner, we recognize it as a musical gesture. It's in the distance because it's filtered. But then on top of that, we hear the... This effect is something that we can describe it. We can say, oh, the music is in the distance. And it's concealed by something. But we're actually experiencing that distance. The piece, the music here is that distance, right? It is that phenomena of foreground, overwhelming background, the reaching, almost the desperate reaching to hear what's in the background. That sensation is what the piece is about. I find this is true for a lot of tape music, a lot of purely electronic music, that more than the construct of the piece, it's the phenomena of the piece that's important, right? It's the physical embodiment of the sound and our total like reckoning within that shape, within that gesture. This piece isn't about Wagner. It isn't about radio. It's about the experience of distance and space, nostalgia, loss, yearning, and it's all right in this moment here. Okay, so you can see that I've been messing around with some of these views to see if there's a better view. I'm just going to jump back to what we had before. And back up to here. So we had the boundary conditions of the static walls, right? If I were to jump over to here, you can hear the static. It's like electrocution. Again, with the Wagner in the background, or not even in the background, in the space. Right? So that's element one. Element two is this beautiful introduction here, where kind of out of that ambient hum. Let me go back a minute further. We have so this instrumental, that sounds like a hum, right? Like amplifier hum, cable noise. right? That transition there from what could still be considered, what you might still be hearing as radio instrumental machine noise. Now it's become something else. Well, if you look at the spectrogram here, this is Wagner here. This is Parsifal. Look at what is the very end here. It's a line that looks the same, but it's not. So we're gonna hear the end of Wagner. There's the return of the hum. All right, so from the hum, we've entered into the world of music, and then back to the hum, the last bit of static, and now this rising gesture that in my ear is a distillation of the Wagner that we heard here. And then that's the end of the piece. And you can hear that. When you hear it, I think you feel that it's an echo or a restatement. But when you see the spectrogram, I think it's pretty clear. Because look, where else is there activity down here? There isn't really. Right? There's this, these big static bits. There's bleepy bloopy bits around, and then there's this low stuff, which is the Wagner, which is in our sort of orchestral range. And here we have the manufactured timbre in the same band as our experience of the Wagner. So they're naturally connected together, but just distilled down and squeezed down. I think this is a beautiful piece. I'm going to link to this article about Ussachevsky, and I'm going to link to another YouTube channel that has the full piece, although you've heard, I've jumped around a bit here, so you'll want to hear the whole piece. Maybe I'll add it at the end here, just so you have it if you want to hear it in this video. Just wrap up though, like in the early 90s, right? I was taking graduate courses at the University of Maryland, which isn't where I ended up doing anything except spending a year, but it was a wonderful time. And there was a music studio, and they had acquired a Fairlight synthesizer, which, if you're my age or older, the Fairlight was the first really impressive commercially available. By that I mean you didn't have to be Columbia or Princeton. You could be the University of Maryland, and it was they were $10,000. You couldn't buy one as an individual, but you could buy one as an institution. And we were going to be able to use it. I created my first ever electronic piece. Not my first ever. Maybe my first mature electronic piece there, where I used a recording of Dylan Thomas reading a poem, A Winter's Tale. And at the very end of it, he says, "And she rose with him, flowering in the melting snow." And I've lost that cassette, unfortunately, because I've tried to recreate it since then when we have access to all this stuff, and I haven't just can't do it. Anyway, before we were allowed to work on the Fairlight, right? I say allowed, before we could even think about how it would work, we spent a semester splicing tape, and the principle behind this, the professor wanted us to understand, was I think a couple of things. First, to understand the concept of cutting sound up and placing it, taking a small piece of tape and playing it slowly, or a big piece of tape and playing it backwards, faster. That these ideas and principles will stand in good stead even as we move to a digital world. I think also there was a part of like a protection or a questioning. Like if you go to a Zen temple, say, I want to practice meditation, they might not let you in on the first knock. The tradition is you have to come back for many days, and then for the first few years, you're just sweeping the floor. And you're like, well, I want to practice meditation. I'm like, well, sweep the floor. So I think there was an element of that. But the thing that really struck me, and continually now, as we have so much technology available to us on the computer here, or I don't know, easily available in a home studio, the beauty of the music that the composers 50 years ago were able to create with these rudimentary tools, and yet, it's magic. This music, Stockhausen, Gesang der Jünglinge, the piece that really triggered my interest in electronic music is by Luciano Berio, Omaggio a Joyce, which is all based on human voice. Delia Derbyshire and the radiophonic studio in the BBC created the Doctor Who soundtrack with tape that they would splice and put together. If ever I start to think, I need some more gear to write something, I remember, maybe what I need to do is look at what I have and make something with what I have. So this piece, I love this piece. I find it haunting in a gorgeous and beautiful way. I find it evocative. Maybe evocative is better than haunting. There's nothing sinister about this piece. It's even the pure radio sounds are crystalline and beautiful. And then within that is this evocation of emotion and the sense of distance in that piece. So anyway, let me know if you like this kind of video. I'm obviously still learning how to do the screen share and audio. I know I'm looking at the screen and not the camera. But let me know if you like this. I want to do this more often because I feel like we can all use little droplets of inspiration. And as I find them, I want to share them with you. So.